Hello, everybody. Welcome to Marketing Should Be Your First Thought, Not Last for Global Game Jam 2024. I have a lot to talk about. So the format's going to be very straightforward. I'm going to go through my little talk, and then we will do some Q&A. And you guys can ask me anything that you would like to ask without issue. So who am I? My name is Michael. I am the founder of Vicarious PR, and Vicarious PR is a leading international marketing and public relations agency. We cover North America and Europe. We've done a lot of games over the past 7 years. We have a staff of about 15. We work with everybody from, solo indie dev teams to AAA publishers and kind of the wide range in between. I've got over 10 years in the games industry. I've launched over 400 games, won 30 odd marketing awards, had worked on some of the biggest games in the industry, and got a lot of success for the clients over the years, which is nice. And so that's kind of my resume for my expertise area. So today is kind of going to be a talk on how to integrate marketing into the initial design and early concept stage of video games, and really look at why that should be your kind of first thing that you should do. Because obviously one of the big things is the most common mistake that we see is people leave marketing to way later, and they're like, oh, we'll build a game and then we'll put the game into production, make the game, and then we'll worry about marketing when it's ready to close to launch. And by that time, it is often way too late. But it also kind of undermines a core problem inherently, is that even when people do start thinking about marketing earlier, it's usually after the game has been conceptualized and designed on paper, and sometimes into an early alpha stage. My recommendations is usually that it is done before you even finish the game design document, and I'll kind of talk about why, the benefits of that, what that actually means in terms of implementation, and the effect that it can have on the game design itself, and how it can set up for success. So one of the things that is important about doing this early and doing this from a game design perspective is really deciding on what type of game you're making, right? Because what type of game you're making and who you're making it for really matters. Because there's a difference between making a game for yourself, and this is a passion project, this is something I want to work on and I want to see made, versus making something that is actually commercially viable. We want to make a game and build a studio and make games for money so that we can have a career in this. Those two things are not the same and have different goals and are done differently. It's not the same, building a passion project doesn't mean that you or let's say building a commercially viable game, or with a commercially with a commercial mindset in mind, doesn't inherently mean that you can't put your passion and creativity into a game. But it does affect things like what type of game it is, what should be in there, what shouldn't be in there, where you can innovate, where you can be creative, what kind of baseline you need to achieve, versus a passion project is very much free form and you're able to kind of do whatever you like. The thing that you should be doing from a game design perspective is always thinking outward, not inward. When trying to craft something that audiences are going to love, you have to think about the audience size and think about what they want to see in their game versus what you think that they want to see. You're not a representation of the market, even if you've been playing games for 20 years. usually at the point of that you choose to become a game developer, you are no longer a representation of the market. You do not think like a normal consumer does. You do not view the games and you know game features as a consumer does. You do not have the same needs and wants as a consumer does. And so it's an important thing to think about very early, because you have to go through the process of putting yourself in the consumer's shoes, or in different consumer shoes, depending on like the target audiences, and figuring out what they place value in, and figuring out where you can implement, innovation versus, creativity, uniqueness, and what kind of things you can add to an existing, let's say, formula that then puts your spin and twist on a project, that's made for, or tried to be made for, commercial success. So one of the things I want to start talking about is games discovery. So games discovery is something that encompasses both organic exposure of a video game, but also encompasses like marketing efforts, things like public relations, things like advertising. And it really does matter, because the design and concept, as well as everything from art style choices, all apply and affect game discovery. So game discovery is how gamers find your game. How visible is the game on, a Steam page, or on the Xbox or on the PlayStation. Um, it's about curb appeal. It's about how people find that game through, Google or social media, and it's also about understanding how and why players purchase, um, not only your game but games in general. So why game audiences choose to purchase, one city builder versus another city builder. And understanding these things can really help you avoid, pitfalls within your game design, and also in terms of how you build your game, and all the different elements throughout that. Um, all your creative choices will impact game discovery. So everything from, visual art to, audio design to key features to game loop to name to branding, everything will have an effect on discovery. And so it's very important very early on to consider all of these elements when thinking about, game discovery as a whole. Because if you go on Steam and you're looking through, games on the upcoming list, or, you're on Next Fest, right now, and you're looking at games, there's an inherent, even some conscious difference between games that you're instantly interested in and games that you're not. And so when you're doing that today or whenever, think it like next time you start browsing through some games, when you click on one, think about why you clicked on it. What was it about the capsule art or the name, or, whatever it was that got you to go, oh, I'm interested in that, and go through the process of figuring out why you're interested in that. And that gives you some slight understanding as to, the how and why of why consumers, wishlist the game, don't wishlist the game, etc. So at the very start, obviously, you got to think about what game to make. So this is an, a difficult conversation to have with developers, because there, as I've stated, there's a difference between what we want to make versus what they want, and kind of figuring out what the middle ground is to make it work, in the real world. There's also, massive differences in the marketplace between genres, between trending, what's not trending, new ideas, innovative concepts versus, standard traditional old stuff that we know that works. But what type of game you make is incredibly important to the commercial viability of a game. And to understand the commercial viability, you have to go through the marketing process of it, and figuring out, what elements we need to put together and the audience size. So targeting a specific audience is always recommended in my book, thinking about what type of audience we want to create that game for. Research and define your audience size. So if you're going to make a really niche game, then great, but like you've got to figure out the line. Does it have the right audience size? Does it have the viability to sell a lot of copies or not? Niche is not bad. Niche tends to be good, but it has to be the right kind of niche. Like it's no good doing something where the audience size itself is very niche to the point where there's not going to be any ROI versus figuring out, well, the overall audience of RPGs is a big audience, but maybe we can find something with a little twist that puts itself as a niche RPG that has the potential of a great audience, but the actual game itself is somewhat unique and different. That's the kind of sweet spot, right? It's about figuring out large audience potential versus making something that's unique and fun. It is always worth checking things like genre averages with tools like GameStats. So GameStats is a great tool that you can use to look up Steam tags, for example, and figure out what the median and average revenue is per Steam tag. And it can help you scope out potential gaps as well. So there's been obviously a lot of games over the years that have taken something in an existing genre and then done something different or something new with their game, and then the game explodes. And it's a very similar premise. So researching, you know, where you want to be, what audience size, what genre is going to be crucial to essentially figuring out if it's going to be commercially viable. Complete reinvention of a genre is not necessary, right? It's totally fine to just do something unique within the game or provide a certain twist, or even just have something a little bit different in terms of the aesthetic or the setting. Like, for example, a CRPG set in you know, feudal Japan with a fantasy steampunk thing, whatever you want to go. Something that has never been seen before in terms of the setting is sometimes enough. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here. You don't have to come up with something that's never been seen before in terms of a game mechanic or a unique feature or a new movement system or a new control system. It's enough to just do something with a bit of a twist that's appealing for that audience, and that's not the same thing. For example, a good example would be when we helped, for those of you who know what the game is, Blight Survival. So when we did that game, that went massively viral and is now one of the top wishlisted games in the world on Steam. And so the premise of that game, the core premise of that game, is actually it's a zombie game, but we don't want just another zombie game, right? And so the cool thing about that game is it's medieval meets zombie. And so two popular genres and two popular tags and audiences mashed together. So you've got melee, medieval combat, knights in armor, smashing their shield into zombies' faces. And then you add in, third person, Unreal Engine, high quality visuals, kick-ass animations, and co-op as well and multiplayer. Then it's a recipe that's designed for a big audience. And it's something that's not the standard. It's a post-apocalyptic world and it's human survivors in a ruined city with guns shooting zombies, which has been done to death. So that's a kind of example of not complete reinvention, but just putting different elements together to create a slight twist and then making it, executing it well. Also, something that you might want to consider is be careful with your estimates, both from a standpoint of your own internal research and also if you ever go and go forward to a publisher. Don't go with the outliers of the industry as your standard. Like if you're making a platforming roguelike, don't put Rogue Legacy 2 as what we're going to achieve in sales, because every genre has massive successes. The likelihood is that that's not going to be your game. Not saying it won't be, but that's not representative of the average game within the genre. And so, you know, look for games that are close in both scope and quality to what you're producing to get an actual realistic idea of what we could expect in terms of things like sales or, um, awareness, things like that. And lastly, avoid oversaturated genres. I can't stress this enough, both as a former journalist and now as someone who does marketing for a living. Um, unless you've got something that's really cool and really unique, it is incredibly difficult to gain success in a genre that has too many games, right? Um, one of the big issues is to don't do a puzzle platformer that's just going to be a middling puzzle platformer. There's so many that the chances of you standing out within that space are minimal at best. Now, there are some, obviously, from a technical standpoint, some barriers to entry with certain genres, as well as consumer expectations. So, like a two-person team is not going to be able to create a 60-hour massive scope CRPG that is going to rival things like Pillars of Eternity and stuff like that, right? But that being said, it doesn't inherently mean that you can't do something within that genre on a smaller scale with a more refined scope, and still hit on the point. Like Into the Breach is a great way of looking at it. Like Into the Breach, small scale, very well executed, and ultimately, is that turn-based tactics, but just on a smaller scale. So it doesn't have to be like XCOM 2. It can be smaller in scope, and as long as it's executed well with a really good premise, then you're going to hit that genre that's not oversaturated and become successful within that realm. One of the big key steps in the marketing process is knowing your audience. Now, one of the big misconceptions about marketing overall is that the idea that people think marketing is about pushing something onto consumers, and it's about advertising, and it's about selling something. It's actually not. That's not what marketing is. Even a lot of marketers think that that's what it is, but it isn't. Actually, marketing is about understanding your audience and consumer. It's about understanding and education. Ultimately, people don't want to be pitched. There's a great quote, and I can't remember who it's from a very old marketing thinker back in the 30s or 40s, who said consumers don't. It's not. Consumers want to be educated and not pitched. Like you don't. You know yourself when you on social media and you see advertisements, and you scroll down. People now have almost developed an inbuilt ad filter in your brain. And so when you're scrolling through TikTok or scrolling through Facebook or something, and you see an ad, you're almost 9 times out of 10, your instant reaction is to just scroll up, just like that. One of the key ways of avoiding that is to create ads and marketing content that doesn't feel like it's an advertisement, that feels more like authentic, real content. And so it's about understanding your audience. It's about researching your audience, understanding them as people, with good and bad, and worries and stresses, and financial limitations, and all of that kind of thing. That's what truly marketing is actually about. It's not about how to sell something. It's about understanding your core audience. And so the first thing that you have to do is figure out who your audience is and who they are, and what do they do, what do they like, what do they not like, where are they, in terms of geography, all of those kind of things. A lot of people think that demographics are audiences, so they go, well, my game is targeting gamers who are male between the ages of 18 and 45. That's not an audience. That's a demographic. That's a component to an audience. That's not an audience. Um, a researched audience contains everything from demographics to psychographics. So that's psychographics are like the psychology and behaviors of consumers. So how many times people browse Steam, how many, what do they purchase, how often do they purchase, what do they like, what do they not like, where do they go on social media, what kind of content do they post on social media, do they have kids, do they have stable jobs, do they have college educations, what are they, what are they worried about, what are their stresses, what are their pressures, all that kind of thing. That's an audience. That's what psychographics contain. Then you've got geography, buying trends, competitors. So what competitors have your audience? What do they look for? What kind of games do they buy? And then other insights and research and bits of data, and put all of those together. Then you've actually got more of what an actual audience is. And then we also at Vicarious, what we do is we build personas. So we take all this data and then we build basically fake people to help understand the audience. So we'll build a Jeff who's 34, 2 kids, stable job, only has time to play maybe 1 or 2 games a month, only probably buys new games semi-regularly, maybe once every 3 months, usually sticks to games sticks to games that have been purchasing games at a discount, only has a couple of hours in the evening to spare, if that. And we build all of these profiles and then figure out like, okay, so how do we reach Jeff, given that he's at work during the day and he browses social media limitedly, and he's not going to buy something straight out of the gate. So how do we talk to him as a consumer and figure out, get him excited enough and invoke an emotion to then trigger a purchase decision, or even just a wish list or some kind of conversion, or follow, whatever it may be. And when you consider that fact and understanding your audience, how critical that is, think about how understanding your audience's likes and dislikes and purchasing decisions and all of those different elements will then affect how you form the concept of your game. Like, because if you know your audience is slightly older and they're most of them have full-time jobs, etc., then you know that an MMO is probably not a great idea because the free time isn't there. They don't have the free time to do that. They want something that they're going to be able to come in and play for a couple of hours, jump out, and then come and play again in another couple of days. And things like that really are informative to the game design process. And when you factor in that, like last year alone, over 14,000 games launched in Steam, that's a lot of games. That's a lot of competition. It's a lot of noise. And so you have to really understand your audience in order to know what kind of game to build, what kind of features need to be in there, what kind of standard it needs to be, but then also how to reach them and where to go to reach them. Because if your audience, for example, if you're planning on doing social media content or social media advertising, it's important to know what kind of social media apps your target audience uses. Because if you're like me and you're older, you're still on Facebook because that was like the first social media that you ever used, and everything else just scares you. So you're probably going to go like, okay, well, we've got a slightly older audience, so Facebook, TikTok, and things like Reddit are probably the place to go. Whereas if your audience is very, very young and you're talking like 16 to 21 or something like that, then most of those guys aren't going to be on Facebook. You're talking the Instagram, you're talking Snapchat, you're talking places like that. And so it will save you a lot of money and time and pain to be able to do this at the start, because it will help you in almost every aspect of your development process, and also optimize when it is time to start marketing your game. You'll know where to go and what to do and how to do it. Um, next I wanted to like kind of transition from the audience into something I'd already touched on, which is like using that audience knowledge to then help build features specifically into the game. One of the things that would be very important to do is think about what kind of things your audience will expect from your game. So is there a feature set that's kind of a minimum baseline? You know, do they are they going to expect an inventory? Are they going to expect a QOL feature? Is there something a control scheme, for example, that is kind of standard across the genre, and so that's kind of going to be um, a minimum requirement. And so, you know, these are the kind of things that's very important when kind of building out your feature set. So research, you know, what things the target audience loves and why they love them. Look at, you know, reviews, look at purchasing decisions, which games in that genre are incredibly popular and why are they popular? What is it about those games that people love? Analyze which games have been acclaimed for their gameplay. So, you know, don't just go, well, this game, you know, this game is popular, especially if it's like a series game. Like take something like Battlefield or Call of Duty. Let's say you're doing a shooter. Look at, you know, you can't just say, oh, well, Call of Duty is popular because of Call of Duty. Why not? Why not instead go dig deeper and go, which Call of Duty do people like the most? Why do they love it? Why does the core audience love Modern Warfare versus Black Ops, or Black Ops versus that, or Black Ops 2 versus Black Ops 1? Um, and analyze like what are the elements that they love about those games, more so than, you know, the others in the series, if you've got that kind of thing. And then start to think about once you're starting to build out your feature list of like what you're going to put in your game, start to think about like what value could I add here? A new theme, a twist on the mechanics, a better way to, you know, an innovative controller scheme, something that's more intuitive, a better inventory system, something that's quicker, easier to manage, you know, a cool little feature that, you know, a new way to do the HUD, minimap, all of these things. It doesn't have to be massive, it can be small, but think about the types of things that will add value to that game, for the core audience. Because if you understand what they like and also understand what they don't like, or the frustrations within a particular genre, like, you know, that like one of the things that is irritating people is a certain way of doing things, then, you know, pick up on that. Try and do something with that will help you stand out. And don't be afraid to try something new. I know it sounds like I'm saying, to a degree, when building a commercially viable product, just do what the audience wants. It's not necessarily about that. It's about taking into a consideration what they expect, or what what they would want from a game. And, you know, try something new. Create a hybrid genre. You know, do a roguelike sports simulation game. Do a, you know, mix and match, like do something fun. Create a new combat system for a JRPG. You know, create a whole new way of doing a dating simulator. You know, whatever it may be. Don't be afraid to try things. It's not necessarily about stifling creativity. It's just that it's more about understanding the type of genre and the type of game that you're building, and then making sure that you're not doing something that objectively you look at and go, "Oh, that would be a terrible idea," because um, everybody won't like that, or um, the audience size isn't there, that kind of thing. And then once you've got your kind of feature list together and you've figured out like what kind of game you want to make, you've figured out like what the overall premise is, then go and view those choices through a marketing lens, right? So that means, how can how can this cool thing that we're building be showcased? Does it add value to the marketing? Does it um does this little thing, like, for example, take a turn-based strategy, would adding really cool execution animations add value? Yeah, it would. Why? Because turn-based games can be a little samey in terms of the combat. And so adding a kick-ass, execution animation, like what was the game I was playing recently? War Tales, which was a fantastic game. War Tales had these cool execution animations when you kill a character, and they don't play all the time, so it doesn't get repetitive. But it's a nice little thing that, one, looks cool for players, and two, from a marketing point of view, is a selling point. Even though it's a very small thing, it's a selling point, and it can be used and showcased effectively in both assets, marketing materials, trailers, all of that kind of thing. So think about viewing those features and everything that you do through a marketing lens, and think about, like, especially if it's a feature that it needs explanation or education, think about how that's going to be showcased. Can you do a 30-second TikTok video on it and make it look good without audio, and people will understand what's going on? Right? Because those are the type of things that are important, because you have to be able, the game has to ultimately speak for itself to a certain degree. And so when viewing things and the gameplay choices that you make, everything from the smallest little detail to the large scale stuff has to be viewed through that marketing lens to understand how you're going to market that, and also does it add value to the marketing, and will people understand it? Because, like, if you think about like the torrent of games on Steam, there's nothing more frustrating than going on Steam, clicking on the game that's got a really nice capsule, looking at the first screenshot and going, I have no idea what's going on in that screenshot, right? Like, it's very, very frustrating, and it's very frustrating for consumers. And so as soon as that happens, are you going to get a wish list for that? No, they're going to press back. They're going to exit out, whatever it may be. So those are the kind of thing, like the thought processes that you have to put in place early to make sure that you avoid building something out that is then going to, be a roadblock or be difficult later down the line. Next, you should be looking at defining your USPs, so unique selling points. Once you've got everything planned out, it's really important to define unique selling points and figure out what elements and features of the game are going to appeal to your audience, and what elements and features are going to be good for your audience, but nothing to shout about in terms of your marketing. So you might find, for example, that, like, if you're building a turn-based game and you say, hey, we've got grid-based combat, well, okay, great. That's not a selling point. Lots of games, turn-based games, have grid-based combat, right? A good example I've got here as well is one of the reasons that defining your USPs is good is it actually might give you an indication of how to expand your audience as well. So we worked on Mirthwood and are still working on Mirthwood. And Mirthwood is a farming sim. And so at first glance, you look at it and go, it's a farming sim. Great. But actually, when you look under the hood a little bit, you actually realize that the core features of the game are more in the vein of a genre hybrid that combines farming sim with colony sim kind of stuff, with the Sims, open world RPG elements, all that kind of thing. So you've got this kind of mashup of this, like, open world farming sim RPG thing. And so by defining the USPs of Mirthwood, what we found was, if we broke down the core features, some of those core features actually target different audiences in different ways. So then we were able to then create a campaign that we said, okay, well, this month we're going to talk about farming and do an announcement on the farming mechanics. And then there's also the colony sim mechanics. There's also the RPG and narrative mechanics. There's the action and the combat, which is more like Souls light. So we'll talk about that. And then there's this big open world and the relationship system, and we'll talk about that. And we were able to actually target it out to different audiences that might be interested in that particular feature, but may not be as excited about another feature. So you're actually able to pull in people from different audiences that might like different games, but because that game has something or a unique mashup, you might be able to discover that you can expand your audience, which is a massive potential with marketing the game. Next, you've got, like, a little bit of a follow-on from your features and building those features. it's important to design with intent and designing everything with your target audience in mind. Obviously, even if it's a case of you're doing something new or you're doing something innovative, it has to be tailored. The final product has to be tailored to that audience. So it has to, it has to make sense. It has to be executed well. The gameplay loop has to be succinct. It has to be gratifying and rewarding for players. Um, you don't want to end up in a situation where you've built something and are missing a key feature that is kind of expected in the genre, and people are like, well, this game is good, but it would be better if it had this. And so, think about those type of things. And again, look for what players love, figure out what they don't like, and then base your decisions on that. Then you've also got think about how those items will be highlighted in your marketing plan. Because really going through that thought process, there's a big difference between what sounds cool on paper and then what actually ends up being cool. Because there is a lot of game ideas out there. This industry is not short of ideas. But what's cool, what sounds cool, and what looks cool, and what is cool are very different things. So make sure that you conceptualize how these things will look, so that you can visualize it and then also put yourself in the consumer's position of like, what would I think if I saw this? Because visuals are important, as much as people say, well, it's got to be gameplay and there's got to be the fun factor and everything like that. That's true, but visuals are important too. So the thought process. So one of the thought process you should get used to is, one, come up with your idea, your feature, whatever it is, whatever idea or thing that you're coming up with, come up with that. Then define why you want it and why you think it's good and why you think it adds value to the game. Then analyze that idea from the target audience's point of view. So put yourself in other people's shoes. If you've got a broad audience, segment that audience down into different mini audiences, what they're looking for, what they would view it, and then and then ask yourself questions like, is that something that provides them value, or does it add to the experience? Is it fun for them? Is it beneficial, even if it's only it makes this easier, even if it's a back end item that makes the game load quicker, or if it's even down to a controller scheme, changing one button to another. Does it provide value? Does it provide fun? Is it better for the game experience from a consumer standpoint? And then what the fourth item is, what does the idea or that particular item add to the marketing and commercial potential of the game? Now, obviously, not every single thing in a game is going to add to the potential marketing, but it's a good idea to think about, because it will help you define your USPs, and it will also help you think about ideas for marketing activations later down the line, or things that you could talk about and showcase. So that's kind of a basic thought process to check your ideas and your assumptions, and think and really start thinking about the marketing from every design decision that you make. So what matters for marketing? It's always a good question. Visuals matter for marketing. Graphics are not everything. This is true. 100%. But they are also your first impression of a game. And if people do not like how it looks, nothing else will matter. It's just the reality of it. There's a reason why the majority of massively wishlisted games and massively successful games, regardless of scope and size, look nice, regardless of what art style they've chosen. Within, whether it's pixel art, whether it's realism, whether it's alternative weird art choice, no matter what it is, there's a reason that a lot of them look very good. It's because the visuals matter. They are the first thing that grabs the attention. They are the first thing that media, influencers, and consumers will look at. The first thing when we outreach to press, when we outreach to influencers, the first thing they do, after reading our email or whatever it is they will go onto the store page and they will look at the game and they will decide instantly if this is something that they're interested in learning about more about or not. It's that I mean, it's that basic. I know it's a bit superficial, but it's the reality. And a lot of there's a lot of people out there who say, well, it doesn't matter, or there's more to it than graphics. That's true, but it's not the full picture, because the full picture is people will make a judgment call very quickly on a game. When we do gameplay trailers right now, we tell all of our partners, you have like 5 seconds to grab the attention of somebody or you're done. Because that's the attention span now. It's the reality. So when we did Blight Survival trailer, one of the reasons that trailer got 90 million views across TikTok and socials and stuff was because the first 5 seconds of that trailer is not a logo reveal. It's not a slow fade in. It's literally the first thing is a knight slamming a shield into a zombie's neck. That's the first thing. That's the first 5 seconds. And you go, oh, what's that? Grabbing attention is incredibly important, whether it's store page, whether it's a screenshot, whether it's a trailer, whatever the medium and the positioning is. It doesn't matter. Visuals are important. And that's not to say that it has to be some big budget thing, but if you're making a cute and cozy game, make it look cute and cozy, right? If you're making a pixel art game, make sure it looks nice. And it looks like a nice pixel art game, and it doesn't have, think about color palettes and environment work and all that kind of thing. Then you've got your gameplay, right? Show, don't tell is the best approach and advice I can give anyone. Marketing, there's a great marketing quote that I've always abided by over the years, which is something along the lines of, marketing is about showing someone how good you are, not telling someone how good you are. And if you tell somebody how good you are, it's like a first date. If you tell someone how good you are on the first date, there won't be a second one, right? So think about like how you can show and not tell. Nobody wants to be told. Nobody wants to be pitched. It's about showing the gameplay in motion and going, that looks white. That's why it's cool. That's why it's good. That's why it's smooth. Whatever it is. If you think about how media and influencers work today, as well as like consumers on social media, nobody wants to read a 5-paragraph email about why you think your game is good. Nobody's going to do that. That's going to go straight into the delete. The first thing that we always do is like put a trailer up, because that's the first thing they're going to look at is like the trailers, the gameplay. Does the gameplay look good? Does it look smooth? Is the performance cool? That kind of thing. Then you've got sound. I can't stress enough how important the sound is. It's one of those weird things I often find in audio design, is that like a killer soundtrack goes a long way, and even just a good one goes a long way too. Sound effects as well are very important, and it's one of those things that like when they're good, they're easily taken for granted, whereas when they're bad or missing, it's easily noticeable. And so audio design is very important to think about when both for marketing and for game, because it does matter in a big way. And there's nothing worse than playing a game that looks like it's got all the potential from a visual standpoint, and then you get in and the audio is terrible. The sound design, the background music, the sound effects are just all awful. So it does matter. Performance is obviously a big factor. Making it smooth, making it run well, regardless of the size and scope of the game. People don't want to see gameplay that's rough. Obviously, there's bugs and there's technical issues across the board, regardless of the game. But when you're showcasing stuff in the marketing, like don't make a trailer where the guy's swinging the sword and then the sword suddenly clips out of his hand for 3 seconds and it's like glaringly noticeable, because once that goes on YouTube, that's all the comment section will be talking about. And yes, that did happen recently, in fact. So make sure that you think about like the performance stuff, especially for things like when it's a playable build, demos, that kind of thing. And then also put a lot of thought into your marketing, and particularly on your assets. So choose your marketing assets carefully. Is this screenshot easy for people to understand? Do they see what's happening? Is it self-explanatory? Because if it's just a color mess and visual mess and nobody knows what's going on, then it's a pointless screenshot, because people are just going to go, that's visual diarrhea. I don't know what's happening. Whatever. I'm not interested. And think about the little touches within your game design as well. Like, little touches can make a big thing in a game, and they really do add to the experience. An extra animation here, a little side quest there, an execution animation, a cool some cool pixel art lighting, dynamic lighting, or something like that. Little touches within the game do go a long way when it comes to marketing. So it's always cool to think about those type of things as well. Incorporate marketing to everything. So start early. Start at the concept stage. Do not start at pre-production or production, or even worse, right before launch. We still have so many developers doing that. It's literally driving me insane. And it's very frustrating for them as well, because oftentimes they realize their mistake and it's too late. And they say, hey, can we get help with marketing? Our game launches in 2 weeks. And most of us marketers will say, no, sorry, there's nothing we can do. So start at the concept stage, incorporate your marketing into the design process and workflow, audience research, genre research, building the hooks, USPs, all that kind of thing. Then in pre-production, start your small outward marketing. So socials, building your content library, testing and adapting based on feedback. Then when you're in full-scale production, big time outward facing stuff. So all PR, events, influencers, socials, trailers, all of that kind of thing. So that's a full marketing calendar timeline. And then when you get up to launch, it's what I call the squeaky bum time, where your butt clenches and you're like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. This is nerve-wracking. I'm an emotional wreck. It will be busy. Be prepared, and also be swamped, because you will be, especially if your game has gathered a lot of attention. It is not uncommon for, especially if you're doing your marketing yourself, or your small team is doing your marketing yourself, you're going to be getting hundreds, if not thousands of emails, key requests, and you've got to vet all those key requests and make sure they're not scammers trying to resell your keys, all of that kind of thing. So be prepared and be ready, and have, the more time you can prepare and the earlier you can start preparing things for later, the better the execution and rollout will be. Here's a couple of list of helpful tools for research and for general helpfulness when doing marketing and research. GameStats.com is a great tool for researching genre tags and revenues for across genres. SteamDB obviously is great for looking at other games, looking at trends within wish lists, all that kind of stuff. Google Trends is good for looking up trends within specific genres, or what people are talking about across media and social media. Sully is a great tool for Twitch streamers. Will help you identify Twitch streamers that have played similar games, how big they are, what kind of and plan out those influencer send outs. Steam Scout is another great tool for looking at competitors and stuff like that. Social Blade is basically like Sully, but it's more geared towards YouTube, so it's helpful to look at which influencers on YouTube are growing, and which games or which influencers are worth talking to. Gainapp.com is a little known tool that's particularly useful if you are doing your own social media. It allows you to connect all your accounts and post simultaneously. It's got a really cool intuitive UI system. It allows you to basically upload all your content and do your content on the app, and then it automatically schedules it out, and you can produce calendars on there and stuff like that. Super cool app. Gamespress.com, good for press releases when it comes time for sending out your press releases and things like that. VG Insights is a great one, similar to SteamDB, providing a good for getting sales estimates and things like that. And then good old YouTube. You can't knock it. Go YouTube, go watch people play games, Go watch people, read the comments, look at similar games, and do just good old-fashioned research for hours and hours. There you go. That's kind of how you can use marketing to start thinking about the game design process. Hopefully that was not too painful for you, and hopefully you got some value and some good takeaways from it. If not, then sorry, I'll do better next time. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to ask. What genres have been good in the last year in terms of median on Steam? Oh no, go have a look. There's been quite a few, really. I mean, City Builder been pretty strong. Warhammer 40,000 is always a strong Steam tag. Cozy has been fairly consistently strong. RPGs usually, or some form or some subset of RPGs are usually consistently strong. FPS is very strong. Free to play is always very strong. So there's quite a few. I mean, you could consider for a moment that there's literally thousands of Steam tags, almost. Think about you can go up there, go on Steam, go on Game Stats, and look up the highest revenue median or the highest average, and just have a browse, and you'll be able to see there's some fairly consistent data across the board. But yeah, those are the type of genres that have been doing pretty well, and obviously multiplayer usually performs fairly well as well. How soon should a studio reach out to a PR agency when one is making a game? Early. The way that I would recommend people do it, don't hire a PR agency straight away. There's no need. As much as, that's kind of the opposite of what my agency would want me to say, because, but I would say get an initial consult first, very early on, maybe in your design stage, and start talking about, if you need help, talk to an expert and say, hey, this is what we're thinking, get some initial feedback, that kind of thing. Then you can really start thinking about moving into pre-production. And then once you move into full production, usually you want to start really talking to an agency about an actual campaign, probably about a year away or a year and a half away from launch. That's when they're going to be really able to help you in a big way. There are minor things that you could do before then, such as the game announcement, depending on when you want to do that kind of thing. But I would say get an initial consult early and consult with multiple agencies, so that you can get a broad range of opinions, because obviously my marketing philosophy is not the same as other people's marketing philosophy. So finding someone that fits your what you're looking for is going to be important. But I would get the initial consult early, and then they can help you kind of plan out what they could potentially do through production and into launch. Could you talk a bit more writing those audience personas? How does a persona make marketing easier, and how does a bad persona make it harder? Yeah, I mean, so all you're doing is essentially taking data and then creating a story behind the data. So it's not a perfect science, right? Like with anything in marketing, that it combines science and art, similar to video games in many ways. So it's about thinking about it's empathy. It's putting yourself in somebody's shoes and creating a story, right? It's figuring out the data here says that we should be looking at males 35 to 45, and they're located in Western countries, and United States. Let's say it's United States, UK, Germany, Sweden, something like that. And then taking your anecdotal points and your data about consumer behaviors, purchasing power, all that kind of thing, and then kind of crafting what someone, what your average consumer or target audience person in the US is going to be like versus the UK, and so on and so forth. There's no real pitfalls. It's just about it's about trying to craft a tool that's helpful to think about when making your decisions. It's not something to base all of your marketing around, in the sense of like, if I make up a fake person with my data, that's not who I'm trying to like base 100% of my decisions on. It's just a helpful guide in like, I should be thinking of Pete and Joe um when I make my social media post about the combat, because it's visceral and gory and they're going to love that. But I should also be thinking about Tom and Kate, because when I talk about my base building stuff, there's a whole slew of um customization options for my character, and for the housing and stuff like that. So I need to be thinking about what they're looking for when crafting my social posts about that feature. And so it's a kind of guide to keep you within the confines of like how to craft your content and how to craft your marketing and game, versus like, this is the thing that we should base 100% of our decisions on, if that makes sense. I mean, it's not perfect, and don't get me wrong, you're going to make mistakes, right? I make mistakes, everybody makes mistakes. So sometimes we make an assumption about the target audience, and it turns out it was incorrect. It happens, right? So the important thing is to kind of test and then um look at the feedback, and then if it's not quite right, then you need to try something different and then gather the data until you kind of nail it on the head. If that answers your question. Gamers are getting increasingly spoiled with content. It's quite intimidating. But then I remember the simple games that explode in popularity. Yeah, I mean, look, it doesn't. Your game doesn't have to be mechanically complex to be good, right? It doesn't have to be that way. It's just about figuring out like how you're going to make it successful, and who it's for, and why you should do it a certain way. I mean, if you look at Vampire Survivors and Soulstone Survivors and the Survivors genre, um, they're bullet hell games for the most part. They're bullet hell roguelikes, and um, if you think about like the accessibility and simplicity of it, um, it's great. And I mean, if Vampire Survivors is a great example, because like, it's not mechanically too complex. And what made that game so successful was that it was accessible to almost everybody, because it had a really low price point. And so it was simple, it was fun, and it was cheap. And so why not? Because you make that same game $15-20. Would it have the success that it does? Probably not. But you make it a couple bucks and make it, and yeah, throw a couple of bucks on a potentially fun game, and then suddenly it is, and it's addictive, and it's a lot of fun, and the gameplay looks cool. Then suddenly you've got a winner. And so it's not, you don't have to consistently compare yourself to like a complex AAA title. It it's about finding your lane and then figuring out how to maximize the potential within that lane. Um, and so yeah. And cool. Awesome. Well, if that's all the questions, I really appreciate everybody taking the time to sit through me and listen to me babble. Um, I hope it provided some value for you and got you thinking about how you approach those kind of things. Or I got one more. How would you recommend approaching a niche market opposed to a large one? It depends on the market. It depends on what the audience potential is. If the audience potential is too small, um, I would not recommend it. I mean, it depends on what I suppose it really depends on the ROI, right? If your game is incredibly cheap to make and you know that you only need like a couple hundred sales to make your money back, and it's a niche genre, then cool, right? But I mean, PR companies do work for smaller markets, but also like from my perspective, if you came to me and said, "Hey, I want to reach out to this market," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm going to charge you like 30 grand for like this campaign. Are you gonna, like, you're never gonna make your money back here."
And I tell you that, like, there's factors in hiring and outsourcing. So you've got to factor that in, is like, can I make money out of this or not? And so it's okay to target niche, small markets, but you have to be prepared to sacrifice certain elements to do it, because obviously if you run up your budget too much, then you're never going to make the money back in sales. So, but yeah, I mean, we talk to indies all the time that, you know, have maybe got, like, you know, a visual novel or something that's quite niche, and or niche within a niche genre. And so, you know, we can advise. You can get advice, and we advise them on, like, what we think is best to do. But yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys. I hope you have a really great rest of your week, and I appreciate you taking the time.